I learned something new this week about Hannah and about Hannah's prayer. And it's one of those things that I've always known, but I made the connection this week. And that's my goal with this sermon, is to help you make this connection, because I think it's pretty cool. And I think it has a big encouragement for just your normal faith life too, as we go through here. Because Hannah's story is one that I've kind of always known. I don't know why I've always known this story. It's the story of Samuel. You guys are familiar with Samuel, right? You know, it's like 1st and 2nd Samuel. He was kind of the high priest that was high priest during the reign of King Saul and kind of found David and all those things. Like that, these are stories that I know really well, and I'm not sure why I know them so well. I think I had like one of those children's story time books that I think I liked the story of Samuel, and so my mom always read it to me or something like that. I don't know. This is just a story that I've always been aware of. And so I'm going to try to communicate it to you for those of you that don't really know who Hannah is, all right? So this, just so that you can understand the timeline of Hannah, this is after the Judges. This is after Moses and the 10 Commandments. This is after Joshua going into the Promised Land, and the people have said, we want a king, just like all the other nations do. They have said that, and God's about to give them a king. But to begin that story, we see that there's this woman named Hannah. And I have a pretty sweet picture of Hannah right here. Like that's her crying, all right, right there. And that's her sister wife. You guys are familiar with the term sister wives, right? This is for polygamists. Yeah, all right. I thought I would get a couple chuckles out of that, because the Bible has a lot of polygamy in it. Like that's so her, as the Bible puts it, rival, right, had many children. And Hannah didn't have one. So all of a sudden you see a lead woman character in the Bible, and she can't have children. What kind of bell needs to go off inside your head? It's like, oh, this is someone important. This is like Abraham's wife, right? This is like Jacob's favorite wife, because remember, he had two as well. Like this is like Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. Like that's all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is interesting, right? Like so and her husband though loves her more than his wife that has been having all the children. Again, this story sounds familiar. and so he loves her so much that he's actually giving her double. I don't know what the actually giving her double is. I mean, did they get like an allowance or something? I don't know. It's like, here you go, you get double. See, she gets double, even though she doesn't have any children. He's giving her double the amount, and yet she can't stop the sadness that's inside of her. Right? She can't stop that sadness that's welled up in her. And here, we'll just read the Bible here. So 1 Samuel chapter 1, beginning with verse 6. And her rival, her sister wife, remember, used to provoke her grievously to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. She's not a very nice person, is she? Like it's like, nanny boo-boo, look at all my children, right? Like you can't have them. You're, like God doesn't like you anymore. Like imagine she's just saying stuff like that, and it's causing her to grieve. So it went on year after year. As often as she went up to the house of her Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. And this is what's so interesting, and this is a little aside for us. Her life is fine. Hannah's husband loves her. He loves her, and he's giving her all kinds of gifts and all these things, even more so than the wife who has the children, right? And yet she still has this sadness deep inside of her. Deep inside of her. And I think there's a little bit of an understanding that we can all have with that. Have you ever had one of those times when, your brain is telling you, everything is fine. I have everything that I need. I have, all that stuff, but your heart is just sad. You just can't seem to get through the day or anything like that. Like, I think that emotion, maybe that's just me. It's like, I know my life is fine. But that's kind of what Hannah's going through here. And she ends up going to the temple, and Eli is there. And Eli is the head priest. He's the head dude, right? He's there, and she is praying in the temple, right? She's praying in the temple, but that's, this picture made me laugh. This has nothing to do with what this actually looked like, right? Because she's praying to the temple. She's got the light of God, obviously, on her face every time she's praying. But that's not actually what's going on, because Eli sees her praying, and he's like, what's going on over there? Because she's probably in a corner. She's weeping and praying to God in the corner. And you guys know the story, right? Here, I'll read. It's 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 13. Hannah was speaking in her heart. Only her lips moved and her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli took her as a drunken woman. And he said to her, how long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. Nothing like a good man of the cloth being sensitive to someone's hurts, right? Like that's like she's all sad and crying. He's like, you should lay off the booze. It's not a good look. It's like, come on, Eli, get it together. Right? And that's actually, like, if we put our biblical glasses on for a second, Eli's sons are terrible. It's actually a view into Eli's leadership that he's actually not that good. Anyway, that's just a quick aside. But Eli he's saying that she looks drunk. She's like, get it together. Get it together, Hannah. What are you doing? And Hannah answered, no, my Lord, I'm a woman who's troubled in spirit. I have not drunk neither wine nor strong drink, and I've been pouring my soul out before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I've been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. Vexation, that's quite a word. But she, he thinks she's drunk, and she's like, no, I'm just so worried and distraught about this that I cannot function, that you think that I'm drunk, which I think is interesting. By the way, if you're hearing this drunk and you're getting overtones from Acts 2, that's probably a good thing. Remember, they were all drunk, and the Spirit had filled them, and the people around them like, why are they drinking so early in the day? Right? So that's interesting too. All this stuff's kind of connected. So he's kind of mocking her, and yet she prays without ceasing. And yet she prays without ceasing. That's what it says in that 1 Thessalonians verse that we read earlier. To pray without ceasing. Everyone is making fun of her. Even the high priest, the man of the cloth, the almighty pastor in the room is saying, get your act together, right? And she still prays without ceasing. She still keeps on going, even through her anxiety and vexation. She keeps on praying. It's that same sense where everything is fine, but your heart just everything is hurt, and she just keeps on praying. And so my encouragement for you at this point in the sermon is to keep on praying. Even if people think that you're drunk, keep on praying. Now, some of you might be drunk. You should probably handle that. But even if people are saying disparaging things about you, keep it up. Keep on praying. Pray without ceasing. And as And as she is praying, she makes a promise with God that if she bears a son, she will dedicate his life to the Lord. That's a big promise. It's like, God, if you give me a son, I will give him to you. Right? That's a huge promise. Again, I reiterate, in my youthful ways of making deals with God, I never said anything to the sense of like, my firstborn son will be yours, type of thing. I will just drop him off at some random church and here, you raise him, right? Like maybe some of you have done that. I don't know. Some churches have really good like Sunday school programs and all that stuff. Like, here, you guys deal with him. He's yours, right? But I dedicated him to the Lord. And this, whenever I read this story, I get that little tinge of guilt. It's like, ooh, there's been a lot of promises I haven't kept. I haven't kept them because Hannah ended up getting pregnant. And it says that she gave her son to the Lord. She gave her son to Eli. Yeah, we'll stay on this slide. She gave her son to Eli when he was weaned. What is he, 2 years old? 2 years old, something like that? What?
Older in those days.
Older in those days. What, 4? 4. Think about that, though. A 4-year-old? Like 4 years old going, here you go. You are the Lord's now. We'll see you when you're 37, right? Like that's amazing. It's amazing that she kept that promise. Hannah stayed humble and she kept the promise. She didn't let her pride overtake her and go, everything's fine now. I got this child. God, he understands. The thing is, God probably would understand, but she still kept it. That's unbelievable. And so here's the cool part of this. Here's the cool part. We'll go back to this slide. This is what I want you to see, and this is what I discovered this week. Like I said, it's something I've always known, but this is what's cool. Her son Samuel, who was born out of her struggle and prayer, that son is the one that finds and brings King David to Israel. Okay? Let me word that another way. Hannah's son Samuel goes out and brings the Lord's Messiah to God's people, because Messiah and king is the same term. And remember the whole stuff about Jesus being in the line of David. He was born in Bethlehem, the city of David. Jesus is intricately connected to David because the Messiah, God's king for the whole world, who is Jesus that we know, is intricately connected to David, and he's going to be like David, okay? Like that's whole thing that Samuel, born out of struggle and humble prayer and following after God, is the one who goes out, finds David, and brings it to God's people. And when Samuel is born, she continues to pray without ceasing. This is an amazing story how God uses the humble to bring about his glory and salvation. You see that? Hannah wasn't anything important. In fact, she was humble and barren, and yet that is who God uses. Remember, David wasn't anything important either. David was the smallest of all of his brothers. All of that. And remember, Jesus was born out behind a house, right? In a stable, however you want to put it. Like that there's nothing inherently important. It's this humbleness. And so she continues to pray. She prays without ceasing. She stays humble. And I want to pull out some things from that prayer. because we see that she's concentrating on how God is against the proud, but he's for the humble. And she says that there is none, this is her prayer that she prays right after all this happens. She goes, there is none holy like the Lord, for there is none beside you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let not arrogance come out of your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty, they are broken, but the feeble bind on strength. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and he exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust, and he lifts the needy from an ash heap to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. And then she points to the Messiah. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken into pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth, and he'll give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. She sees God lifting up the humble. She's already pointing to the anointed one. Her son Samuel is the one who finds David, and in his line that's pointing to the Messiah, to Jesus, she's pointing to the one who will pull us all out of our pain. And this Jesus is the one who pulls us out of our pain. When we are mocked like Hannah, when our anxiety and vexation is holding us down, this Messiah in the line of David, this Jesus, the one who comes to rescue us, he was also spit on and mocked and hung on a cross, so that no matter what we go through, we know that God has been through it all and that he takes us with him to life, even through the disaster. And Hannah sees just a portion of that, and she prays for that at the end of her prayer. So, what's the point? What's the point of all this? I think it's really cool that her son Samuel, that all that struggle that Hannah had, all that humbleness in prayer, that never going back on that prayer, that the Lord gave her a son, and that she actually kept her promise and gave it to the Lord. And that son that was born out of that struggle and prayer, all that heartache, found King David, or again, to put it another way, found the anointed king over Israel. And my prayer and blessing for you today is that when you experience the real hurts of this world, that you would continue to pray without ceasing, even if you look like a drunken mess, right? That you would continue to pray without ceasing, and that those sufferings, that those hurts, that those pains, that those times that you didn't know when you could go forward, that those things would birth love and an experience that would be just like Samuel, that would find and take God's true Messiah, Jesus, to the people around you. That the Messiah who came in the line of David, that they would come through your prayers without ceasing, through your struggles and pains, that God would bless them so that others may know that God saves, even through your struggles. That is what I saw this week. When I was looking, I was like, oh my goodness, look at that. Because that's so consistent with the Bible. That's so consistent with how God uses us, that it's not through our perfections that he's using us, but by when the times when we feel hurt and our weaknesses, God seems to use those to bring the hope of the Messiah to all the folks around them. So have peace and know that God is with you even in the struggle, and that he is bringing you onto his mission even when life feels like it's too much. So have peace in his name. Amen.